Adventures in Research. War has many faces. To the soldier, a twisted mask of death and destruction. To those at home, sacrifice and separation. And to medical men, the appearance of strange, baffling disease. In World War I, a virulent disease, gas gangrene, took a heavy toll of the wounded, and doctors stood helpless before it. This is Paul Shannon bringing you another transcribed story of science, produced as a public service in cooperation with the Westinghouse Research Laboratories. And today bringing the story of a girl's unusual courage, Mary Davies, an English nurse, who without thought of glory of self, risked her life to help conquer a dreaded disease of war. The time, 1915. The place, the American hospital at Neuilly, France. Dr. Kenneth Taylor, a young pathologist from the University of Minnesota, had volunteered his services in the medical corps for research. The head surgeon of the hospital, Colonel Redding, has just taken Dr. Taylor on a tour of the wards.
Well, Dr. Taylor, speak frankly. What's your impression?
Colonel, it's a very depressing picture.
Yes, I know. But then, war never is pretty.
As a pathologist, I've seen much of disease, but never anything like this.
Is it any wonder we refer to gas gangrene as the scourge of the war?
Tell me, Colonel, the symptoms of the disease, do they ever vary?
Rarely. All the cases I've ever seen were the same. At first, the wounded limb begins to swell. Then gradually the skin goes through discoloration from dusky red to black and green. Finally, the wounded area is covered with blisters filled with gas, the sign that the disease is far advanced and the gas bacillus is at work below in the tissues.
And the prognosis?
Fatal. Blood circulation to the limb is choked off, toxins liberated, massive edema. Patient hasn't much of a chance.
Colonel Redding, what contributes mostly to the onset of the disease?
Oh, there are various probabilities, but it seems to narrow down to this. When an enemy shell explodes near our men, the burst of shrapnel wounds the soldier, and in doing so, flying bits of soil on the metal fragments become deeply embedded in the wound and cause contamination.
Then, if I understand you correctly, sir, the disease comes not from the shrapnel, but from the soil.
Exactly. The bacilli which cause it thrive in the soil.
The latest drugs, have you tested them?
Oh, there's hardly a drug or antiseptic that we haven't experimented with. The gas gangrene bacillus is anaerobic, grows without air. If the depths of the wound can be completely exposed, the injured tissue removed, antiseptics applied, there is a chance. But usually you can't do that. What we need is an antitoxin.
Colonel, this is a formidable assignment.
Yes, it is, Doctor. No man should be expected to do the job, which by rights requires hundreds of skilled research personnel working night and day to find a cure. But this is an emergency. We're at war, and time is short. Each bombardment, each German shell lobbed into our trenches today means that tomorrow 3 out of 5 wounded brought to this hospital will be gas gangrene cases.
Now, speaking of time, Colonel, would you show me to my laboratory?
Oh, yes. Come along. I want you to meet your assistant. Here's our laboratory, Doctor. Nothing fancy, but it has all the needed equipment.
That will do very nicely.
Oh, Miss Davies.
Yes, Colonel Redding.
Do you mind leaving your microscope for a moment? I want you to meet Dr. Taylor. He's just come from America. Doctor, this is Mary Davies.
Glad to know you, Dr. Taylor.
How do you do, Miss Davies?
Dr. Taylor will take charge of all research for the hospital, and I know that you, Miss Davies, will give him every possible assistance in this work. Good luck to both of you.
Well, this is certainly a surprise. I never expected...
To find a young girl.
And English, too.
You object?
Oh, no. But, well, you must admit, one doesn't usually find an attractive young woman in a pathological laboratory.
There were 7 of us in training at the Pasteur Institute.
Oh, so that's it. You're a bacteriologist. Tell me, Miss Davies, why are you working here in an American hospital? Why not in a British hospital?
The American hospitals are closer to the front. They afford better opportunities to study types of war disease that I am particularly interested in.
Oh, I see.
Any more questions, Doctor?
Not right now. But I'll think of some.
Thus began an unusual wartime partnership. An American research doctor and his English girl assistant working together for a common cause. Dr. Taylor found Mary Davies a tireless worker with a scientist's talent for pursuing detail, and above all, blessed with infinite patience. A few months later...
Dr. Taylor?
Yes, Miss Davies, what is it?
I was passing by and saw the lights.
Couldn't very well work in the dark, could I?
So I thought perhaps you might like...
Some tea, no doubt.
Yes.
Are you British and your afternoon tea?
But it's past midnight, Doctor.
Oh, is it now?
In 20 minutes, it will be 1 o'clock.
All right. I'll shut up shop. Ah, this tea. Nothing tastes so good as English tea brewed over a Bunsen flame at midnight. Gives a man courage to go on.
Discouraged, Dr. Taylor?
No, I'm not exactly optimistic. 2 months of grueling labor, 12 to 15 hours a day. Injecting guinea pigs with cultures taken from dying patients. 2 months. What have we to show for it? The patients die, the guinea pigs die. And we're no closer than when we began.
More tea, Doctor?
Oh, no more, thank you. When are you going to England on leave?
2 weeks from now. Why?
Know what my friendly advice is, Miss Davies? Don't come back.
Oh, don't worry. I'll return.
Why? Why subject yourself to this? To be a martyr to science? It's obvious we're up a blind alley. Enjoy yourself in London. Go to parties, dance. Forget that this laboratory even exists. That's my advice.
Dr. Taylor, are you trying to get rid of me?
Heavens, no.
My work to date is entirely satisfactory.
Superlative.
Then if you don't object, I'll stay on.
Now I understand why perseverance is considered an exclusive British trait. All right. I won't stop you from making a martyr of yourself.
Doctor, we received a new drug today, quinine. Perhaps we might run some tests on it in the morning.
If we don't leave here soon, it will be morning. Good night, Miss Davies.
Good night, Doctor.
That morning, Mary Davies began a routine assignment to test a different drug. 4 guinea pigs were injected with the bacillus of gas gangrene. 2 of the animals were set aside as controls, while the remaining 2 were given injections of quinine hydrochloride. Then Miss Davies went about her other laboratory duties. 18 hours later.
Dr. Taylor,
Yes?
the 2 controls are dead.
Wasn't that to be expected?
But the 2 injected with quinine, they're still living.
Alive? Come on, Miss Davies. Let's check on it.
Doctor, one of the animals injected with quinine just died.
Our usual run of luck.
But look at the other one.
What about it?
It's perfectly healthy, no sign of disease,
Impossible.
not one symptom of gas gangrene.
Are you sure this animal was injected with the same dose that killed the others?
Absolutely.
Repeat the test with 4 new animals. This quinine may be what we're looking for.
Now the laboratory was pitched to a new level of excitement. Months of discouragement, of desperate groping in darkness, brought a glimmer of hope. Quinine. Tests were made, and they began to give systematic results. Animals injected with quinine survived. Those without it died.
Dr. Taylor, at long last we've found our drug.
Caution, Miss Davies, until we're certain.
But our results, what better proof?
We've observed its effectiveness on a few laboratory animals, and that's all. Quinine may or may not be our answer. Only time will tell.
Don't you believe it's time to stop experimenting with animals?
Miss Davies, are you suggesting...
Why not? Those dying men deserve a chance.
That's female sentiment, not logic. I need not remind you, Miss Davies, that under no circumstances are we going to test an unknown drug on a living being. Not until such a time as our experiments have revealed undisputed proof of its effects. Therefore, I suggest we continue our work with guinea pigs, shall we?
You are my superior, Doctor. Oh, one more thing.
Yes?
My leave begins tomorrow. You remember I mentioned it to you.
Oh, how long will you be gone?
2 weeks, no more.
Well, you've earned the vacation. Enjoy yourself. Have fun.
I shall try to.
Good. I'll carry on.
That same night, Mary Davies packed her bags for England. And then, as if acting on impulse, she paid a last visit to the laboratory while Dr. Taylor was absent. She concealed a small vial in some cotton and left. In the morning, instead of boarding the train, she rented a room in a rooming house in Neuilly. And there, in the privacy of that room, she performed a hazardous experiment. That done, she sat calmly and waited. 3 hours later, she returned to the laboratory.
Miss Davies, why aren't you on your way to England?
I've changed my mind.
But I don't understand.
I've come to ask a favor. But first, promise me you will regard this with objectivity as a scientist.
Of course, but...
3 hours ago, I injected 10 cubic centimeters of gangrene bacilli into my system.
You what? 10 cc? Do you realize what you're saying?
I do.
Why, 2 drops is enough to...
I know that.
It's a fatal dose. What in the name
I
of...
want you to test the quinine, Dr. Taylor. On me.
But why would you ever do...
Hadn't you better get started, Doctor?
Dr. Taylor injected quinine at the points of inoculation of the deadly gas gangrene bacilli. That done, Mary Davies was sent to the hospital for observation, where quinine injections were administered for the second time. Symptoms of a slight degree developed, but within 24 hours, they subsided.
Well, young lady, you were lucky. Not a trace of gas gangrene.
Then we can begin using quinine in the ward.
Yes, of course. Miss Davies, I hope you realize that I don't personally approve of what you've done. It borders on the theatrical.
Doctor, I believe that the stakes were high enough to make it justifiable.
I don't know. But one thing I do know, I am sincerely grateful. And so will be thousands of others. I could paraphrase Dickens, Mary Davies. Greater love hath no woman, who in the interest of humanity lays down her life to help her fellow man.
Dr. Taylor,
Yes?
who's bordering on the theatrical?
Gas gangrene, so rarely seen today, is not the scourge it was during World War I. Neither was quinine the cure-all it once appeared to be. But this does not alter the courage and devotion of an English nurse who took her life in her hands that others might live through her adventure in research. And that's today's Adventures in Research, produced in cooperation with the Westinghouse Research Laboratories. These programs are broadcast to Armed Forces personnel overseas through the facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Join us again next week for another transcribed story of science on Adventures in Research.